So, good afternoon to everybody. I'm happy to be able to be here for the first time, and actually I think this is also a testament to the maturity of this industry. Obviously, SAP, to those who do not know, a German-based company, software company, about 85,000 employees. Revenue around $23 to $24 billion. So you can imagine it's a pretty big company. And obviously a company like SAP, which we're a software-only company, focusing and coming here and spending time with the Materialise folks with the additive manufacturing is a testament to the journey that has really have gone with this industry, and really what we're seeing also is the demand from the market. So I'm going to share a bit of our perspective on it, and before I do that, let me start with a very simple perspective, maybe from an SAP executive one. In order for SAP to continue growing and evolving, we have to keep a rate of about 5% to 10% growth. On $24 billion, that's about a new growth of $1.2 to $2.4 billion every year. So top line, you need to add that amount of money. If you add to it, not all products continue to grow. You have also declining products. So in essence, every year, you have to, in essence, add about anywhere between $2 to maybe $3.5 billion of net new top-line revenue. And that doesn't change. And the next year, it's even more. So obviously, for large companies to sustain, market expectations, to sustain our growth and attractiveness in the market, we have to do a lot of the things that were mentioned before. Innovate, do an ecosystem, work with everybody, and really transform ourselves. So with that, additive manufacturing is one of the ways we believe we are going to transform ourselves, and we're seeing the market also transforming. And maybe I'll start with a very interesting example. Anybody knows who James Casey? If not, you have 5 seconds to Google it. So American messenger company is UPS. They started in 1907, and their first big innovation was 6 years later when they actually purchased their first T model, Ford T model, and started not doing only messaging by horse and by foot, but actually also with cars. Obviously, they've managed to innovate and continuously grow, and as you see, $61 billion in revenue, 108,000 cars, etc. So one may actually say, this is amazing, what a success, what, great assets, etc. The flip side of it, that this could also be a liability. So if you think of some of the challenges that companies like UPS are having today with the digital transformation and the power shift. So let me give you a quick example. Dell, and this is also a hypothetical, so an electronics good company now gets an order online. Instead of calling their warehouse and getting a shipment, they actually call up Uber. Uber gets the location of the customer to deliver, but they also get the location of a store to pick up that laptop. So that could be a Best Buy in the US, that could be a Walmart, here in Europe, it's different. And all of a sudden, 45 minutes, an hour after the person entered his purchase online, he actually gets the laptop. Obviously, that's a huge challenge for the supply chain. That changes a lot of things. So we're seeing a lot of changes happening, not only in manufacturing, but also in the entire supply chain. And when we look at 3D printing and additive manufacturing, we're looking at it end to end. We're not looking at it only from a perspective of, how do you make just the manufacturing quicker? We're looking at the digital thread and how do you make the entire process faster. So obviously we, as consumer, want all the time also immediate gratification. We expect everything to happen now. We don't have any more patience. We can't read long articles. Everything needs to be quick and now. So that puts also a huge pressure on the entire manufacturing, the entire inventory. And obviously, this is not a phenomena that is limited to a certain country or a certain market. We're seeing it across multiple industries and everywhere. So what does that mean? So and by the way, this is all public knowledge. I'm not sharing anything here that is confidential. We worked very closely with UPS and actually discussed how do you really now use all of their network of warehouses and to transform them from a liability again to an asset that nobody could replicate. And if you think about it, part of it is how do I redefine what is logistics? It's not only transportation, but it should also include in it, in essence, some light manufacturing, also light assembly. So we've seen, I walked the show floor here, and we're seeing all kinds of interesting products where are a combination of a couple of things. So, an insole that has some customized elements and then is assembled with a standard. Or, as you probably saw, there's lots of examples of all kinds of light assembly that all of a sudden makes that product personalized. So what is happening is that people are interested in the quick, fast, elaborate products, but they're also interested in personalization. It may be the hand on the joystick, it may be the frame, it may be all kinds of different things. So what UPS is beginning to do right now is they're opening their logistics centers to 3D printing. They're actually putting in Louisville, Kentucky, which is their biggest hub in the US, and they're actually beginning to put it in other places. They're putting additive manufacturing capability there. So now when they have a relationship with that electronic supplier, they can offer him additional personalization and additional services beyond just the standard everyday production. So they are actually beginning to transform themselves just like they did over 100 years ago. And this will continue on. And there's going to be a lot of changes. But again, additive manufacturing is seeing, I think, a renaissance from an industrial perspective. Not because of the maturity of the technology. Obviously, it's a part. But the key element here is the readiness of the market and the demand. And what we are seeing is that companies are demanding results that if you want to really deliver on them, additive manufacturing, or what we call distributed manufacturing, because it could be also CNC, it could be also laser sintering, it's not only additive manufacturing, could only be delivered with that kind of infrastructure. So We actually have Pete here, and the first time that we, from Gartner, who will come and talk at the panel, but the first time that we actually came out with our collaboration was at CES 2016. We then, nine months later, we announced our the first 12 co-innovation companies that we worked with. And you can see here some logos that you're familiar with, but I will point out Jabil. To those who do not know, Jabil Circuit is the third largest manufacturing company in the world, 200,000 employees. So everybody is familiar with Foxconn. Most of you are probably familiar with the name Flextronics. Jabil is the third largest out there. And so Jabil Circuit is really adopting and additive manufacturing across the board. Sealed Air, Moog is an aerospace and defense company. Moog, some of you may know them as synthesizers, but they also do. So anyway, you have here an interesting mixture of both real hardcore manufacturing companies and as well as service providers. 4 months later, we then announced, and we had at the World Economic Forum at Davos, a really long discussions about distributed manufacturing, and how does that impact the entire world. And one of the interesting things that came out of it was a market that I haven't seen a lot being discussed here, but we see it a lot, is the postal industries. So we have about 4 or 5 different postal companies, statewide companies, that are looking into additive manufacturing as a way to address some of the declining revenues and the pressures that you have in the world of the postal, where letters are not as popular as they were in the past. Packages and shipments, they have a lot of competitions from the UPS and everybody else that is trying to become now a logistics company. So with all of that, we're seeing, again, additive manufacturing help transform multiple industries. But at the end of the day, our view of additive manufacturing and everything else is quite different than everything that I heard up to now. All of the sessions that were up to now were really focused on the design. How do I design a better part? How do I, is it this kind of a design? Is it that kind of a design? And really, I would say the technical, what we call the feasibility. How do I push the materials? How do I push the actual design, the software design, the optimization? We come from the world of, what is the business imperative? Does it make sense to, what is the business logic? And it comes from basically ERP. So in the ERP, you have all of the information about your production, your manufacturing, and it doesn't really matter if it's an SAP ERP or somebody else, but all of that exists there. Not only that, you have all of the other information about exactly the shipments. A standard thing as an MOQ, or as minimum order quantity. So if I want to buy something or to replenish my inventory, there's an MOQ. So that number is there for every part. So let's take an example of an assessment. What do we mean by an assessment? Because what you're seeing right now are the 3 different modules of our solution. So the first part is the assessment, and in it you come from really a business perspective. And the classic example, you have an MOQ of 1,000 parts. Your serviceability on a part, let's say you have 2 more years. You've been using up, let's say, 100 parts. So in essence, you need now to make an order for 1,000 parts, while in reality you expect only to use 200. Now, does that make sense? And what about all the costs about later on? Inventory and keeping it and etc. So, and you don't know if you're really going to use 200, and maybe over the last 2 years, it may be even down less. So you may end up doing, only 100, using only 100 out of the 1,000. So all of a sudden, you have a really strong case for taking an existing part, what we call 3D friendly part, as opposed to 3D native. All of the discussion that we saw before, or that I was previewed to before, everything was around what we call 3D native parts. That you come in and you say from the get-go, I'm actually going to create a new part with the knowledge that this is from the beginning going to be a 3D printed part. Not only that, it was referenced a couple of times, what is the biggest challenge that you're seeing with 3D printing? Getting the engineering to understand the technology, to think about it, to begin using these capabilities. What happens, and what we're seeing with our customers, that when you come from the CFO, when you're coming from procurement, when you're coming at it from a place of this is a financial decision, and they have a mandate not to decide whether they use it or not because of engineering or capabilities or new features, but it's a financial decision that was given to them and they need to execute. The engineers, in essence, have to do it. And all of a sudden, they're acquainted with it, they feel more comfortable with it, and native parts begin to kind of pop up, a merging of parts begin to pop up, but really the impetus of everything is not the engineering, but it's actually the business and the financial logic. So the first part is, in essence, the reports and capabilities to do that, and we'll talk about that. Collaborations and approval is then the process, and I'll show that in a second. Again, both of them are pre-production. It's before you even produce a single part. So we are, again, talking about industrial manufacturing. I'm not talking about rapid prototyping. It's not. We are really trying to enable these parts to be, at the end of the day, part of your manufacturing toolbox. And last but not least, distributed manufacturing. So the primary use cases that we are seeing are actually not the 3D native parts that everybody talked about. Number one for us is the long tail, the aftermarket. Number two, we do see a lot size of 1. But I would say this is more in the, it's not, if I would talk about size, and I would need to put size, I would put number 1 in font 50. And then 2 and 3 are font 8. Okay, so there is a big difference between the traction that we're seeing in number 1 versus number 2 and number 3. And number 2 and number 2 is, in essence, variance. So you have a standard part, but you start obviously modifying it for a lot size of 1. So I wanted to share with you another SAP asset that some of you may be aware of it, but we talked, the name of the title of the presentation was Business Networks. For those of you who don't know, Ariba Network is a product of SAP. It's a marketplace for procurement. 2.5 million companies on it, sellers and buyers. $1.3 trillion in spend. 1.3 trillion, that's 1,300 billion. So in essence, just so you understand, it's a B2B marketplace. So it's more commerce than Alibaba, eBay, and Amazon combined. But it is a B2B, so the number of transactions are a lot bigger. and they're done. It's not your consumer. But obviously, we're leveraging this in order to drive also additive manufacturing, because everything that we're doing is connected to the procurement. We're coming at it from the procurement, from the business, from the finance side. So Ariba Network is a key component of everything we do. And the capabilities of Ariba Networks and Ariba Networks will be distributed, manufactured, enabled, and I'll show that in a couple of minutes. So just to summarize quickly, because I think I don't have much, 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes. Okay, just to quickly. So part assessment, this is what we talked about. We run standard reports in order to figure out the parts that you need to be selected. You then go through this process of really, it's a new part. You need to, and you all know about it, how do I go from a standard part to now an additive manufacturing part? And then obviously, when I'm done with that, then I add the production, which over here also includes the logistics providers, whether UPS or others, but then you have the digital thread in which somebody could enter the work order, and then actually after less than 24 hours at the doorstep of the customer. I did promise to share with you a couple of things, as was said about the Hanover Messe. So next on Monday, we'll actually be officially launching SAP Distributed Manufacturing at the Hanover Messe. And I don't have time to go over these, but these are some of the new capabilities that we'll be showing. Some work that we've done about design optimizations. We've been working on materials and obviously working on with printers companies, including EOS as one of them. We'll also be showing some of the work that we've done with Moog and some of the capabilities around metal pricing, as well as blockchain. So I'm not going to have enough time, but blockchain is a distributed ledger that we're leveraging also to write to in order to be able to have the provenance and the global track and trace. And another example that we're working with another company that you're familiar with. So this is some screenshots from, on the right-hand side, you're seeing some of the SAP distributed manufacturing. On the left side, you're seeing some of the Ariba screens that procurement officers or people work with. And you basically see a complete, it's completely integrated. And over here, this is a visual that you could do marks up, and there's workflows and all kinds of other things. We don't have time to talk about it. And last but not least, some of the things that we're looking into with expanding into the future. So that's it, and thank you very much.